So these are really tough issues to wrestle with.
We need everybody to speak out, so yes.
What would we do differently?
We have to start thinking further ahead, and we can do it, and we must do it.
Good evening, everyone.
Can't see you.
It's okay. Hello, and welcome to the Friday night evening program of the second day of AREDAY. I'm delighted that my partner Sally Ranney is here with me on the stage, and we are going to do a really special evening program right now. And Sally's going to tell you a little bit about it.
Well, we have 3 awards that we're giving out tonight, and we haven't put who the recipients are in the program, so it's a surprise for all of you. The recipients know who they are, and the 3 are the AREDAY Award for the New Energy Economy, the AREDAY Ecosystem Hero Award, and the 3rd one is the AREDAY Stepping Up to the Plate Award.
You might consider this somewhat of the AREDAY Oscars.
Right. Okay,
So, without any further ado, we'd like to award our first recipient. Would former Governor Bill Ritter please join us?
Let's move over.
So, go ahead. So, Governor Ritter, for your amazing 4 years of service to the state of Colorado and to the nation, we are honored to present you with the 2011 AREDAY New Energy Economy Award. This is the man who brought you the new energy economy. Please acknowledge Governor Ritter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
The second award is the AREDAY Award for the Ecosystem Hero. And would Dr. Sylvia Earle please come? And Sylvia, as you know, has spent her entire life working for the ocean. She's the finest ambassador for all the creatures in that 97% of our planet that is the blue heart of the earth. And she is the perfect recipient. This is our first Ecosystem Hero Award. Thank you.
And the world is blue.
Thank you. And now we have a very, they're all special awards, but this one is, this is a new category. It probably won't be given every AREDAY, every year. And this is the Stepping Up to the Plate Award. Would Tom Steyer please come to the podium? Tom was one of these folks who waited to see who was going to show up on Proposition 23 and who was going to stop having the California Global Warming Act be dismantled, be unraveled by the oil industry and the coal industry. And he waited and nobody showed up. So he stepped into the void. He put his money where his mouth was. He put a coalition together, and guess what? They won. So he stepped up to the plate.
Thank you, Tom.
I don't deserve very much credit for this. There was a huge number of people who were smarter, worked harder, and had more effect than I did. But on their behalf, thank you very much.
Okay, so at this point we would like to begin, and if Ted Turner would please join us on the stage, along with Mr. Tom Steyer. Obviously, none of these people need an introduction, so Sally, please take it away.
Well, I've done, thank you. I've done a couple of these armchair conversations over the last few years here and in Mexico at the UN conference on climate change. And one of the things that I always try to do is to figure out what is the common ground of the individuals that are going to have the discussion. The discussion tonight is the business of philanthropy. And before I talk about what the common threads are with these two extraordinary gentlemen, I want to give you a definition of philanthropy from the dictionary. It literally means the love of humanity, goodwill to fellow members of the human race. Now, these two gentlemen have expanded that to include the earth and all of the natural systems and the other creatures that we share this planet with. So what's the common ground in their lives and in their philanthropy? They have energy, they have passion, they're both environmentalists, they're obviously philanthropists, they think big, they think about leveraging whatever it is they're working on to get the maximum benefit, they're authentic and original. And so what's the difference with the two of them? The difference is that this one's a legend. And in about 20 years, I predict that this one will be. Now, they're also serial founders. Now, Tom founded Farallon Capital, which manages about $20 billion in asset. He founded the One California Bank, which goes into neighborhoods that other banks won't touch and provides loans for mortgages and loans for small businesses. He founded Greener Capital, which is a much smaller fund, but finances startup renewable energy companies. And he's also put together something called Tomcat Center for Sustainable Energy at Stanford University. He's also on the board of Stanford University. And his latest endeavor, a nonprofit, is called Advanced Energy Economy. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's so appropriate to what we're discussing here at the summit. Ted, as you know, founded CNN, Turner Classic Movies, the Cartoon Network, Turner Broadcasting. It goes on and on. His philanthropy, he's funded and founded the UN Foundation, the Turner Foundation, which is a private family foundation. He also has the Turner Endangered Species Fund, the one and only privately funded endangered species fund in the world. He started the Better World Society, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, which has made great advancements in disarmament. And his latest venture is Ted's Montana Grill, which is 46 restaurants that serve, guess what, bison. Ted has started out with 5 bison, 3 bison, ended up with 5, and now he has 55,000 on 2 million acres. He's the second to the largest private landowner in the United States. His good buddy, John Malone, bought a place up in Maine recently, and I think now
He doesn't have as many bison.
has 100,000 acres more than he does. So we're talking about the business of philanthropy. Philanthropy has become actually really big business in this country. It requires a great deal to do it right, a great deal of strategic thinking, business plans, understanding what works, what doesn't, what organizations or mechanisms are going to make a difference, what you can leverage, where you can put some money but leverage that into a much larger picture. And so one of the questions that I'm really interested in from both of you, and I'd like both of you to answer this, is do you think that philanthropy can really push public policy, really change public awareness in this country?
Do you want to go first?
I don't care.
Me neither. I'll go.
I'll go.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I am not exactly, I heard the definition of philanthropy, but I actually don't really think of myself in those terms. So if I were to recast the question I would ask is, can individuals in the United States, using their own passions and intellect and resources, impact how people think? And I think the answer is obviously yes, because resources are part of it, and somehow ideas have to get out there. But for a long time, individuals in the United States have had ideas that are strongly held and which they're willing to work really hard for. And if they then have some resources so that they can express them more broadly in society, then I think that's more powerful. So I would say, yes, individuals with resources who really care about things and are willing to enter the fray and be open can definitely have an impact.
I agree with that.
Anything to add?
I'll wait for the next one. No, I think he did a really good job of covering it.
Good.
Or if I could think of anything important to add, I would do so.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more specific, and I'm going to ask you a specific question, Tom, about your new venture, Advanced Energy Economy. That has a very specific focus and purpose. Could you share that with us?
Well, I think everybody in this room agrees that we have to change the way that we generate and use energy in the United States. And the question that came up when we were working against Proposition 23 was, how were we going to express that message in a way that people could hear it? And who were the people who could be credible messengers that normal folks who don't spend their time thinking about policy could trust and believe in? And one of the things that seemed to be true in terms of thinking about energy is it's basically a business function. It has lots of side effects, but in effect, business is going to have to do it. And if we're going to change, new businesses with new technologies are going to have to be at the forefront. So the question that my partner Hemant Taneja and I were faced with was, how are we going to organize that? And how are we going to get that voice to be effective on a local basis and a state basis and a national basis so that we could be heard? Because when I know here everybody knows policymakers and technologists and business people who are absolutely committed to this idea, but I think that most Americans, including elected officials, really don't hear the business voice for what we've called the advanced energy economy, which is supposed to bring to mind the internet economy, the idea that we need a new energy complex, and it's that much of a change, and that business is going to be absolutely essential to how we do it.
And how are you organizing that?
Well, one of the big issues is energy. I think everyone would love for this to be solved from a policy basis in a single stroke, but actually it's very much of a regional and local issue because energy is both generated and consumed very differently around the country. And people face very different problems, and they have very different opportunities when they think about it. But I think everybody, when we talk to people around the country, virtually everybody knows this change is coming. And so when we were thinking about how to organize it, we felt as if everybody wants to throw the bomb in DC, and we felt like to really build the kind of foundation that we need, we've got to be much more regional. And that basically the business and the policy is going to be organized around clusters, really innovation-based clusters in the country. And you can go to an awful lot of places here and talk to elected officials, and they're dying for this. And you can go and talk to a whole bunch of entrepreneurs all over the country, and they've got ideas coming out of their ears. So that's how we decided to organize it, was to try and make sure that we had a ground game that was locally organized.
Mm-hmm. Now, climate change is a global concern, obviously. And it's a whole systems problem, and it requires whole systems solutions. And you're working brilliantly in the United States, and you on the international level. Tell us a little bit about what the UN Foundation is doing. Goodwill to Humanity, there's a lot of those programs, as well as how you're addressing climate change.
Could I just ask a question and answer it?
Yes, of course.
Because this is a good group to bring this up with, because I've been giving the overall situation a lot of thought lately and a lot of study, and I think we're making a mistake of being a little too reactive, which I understand. For instance, with global warming, we're reacting to a problem we just learned about. One of the things that has been very important so far at this conference is, we don't have an energy policy. Our country doesn't have an energy policy. But beyond even that, because having an energy policy would be part of having a policy, and we don't have any idea. We're going on 4-year cycles, the elected cycle, some 2 years, some 4 years. And nobody's thinking beyond 4 years. In fact, they're really not thinking beyond 6 months. Too much short-term thinking. I think what humanity needs to do is sit down at a table and write down, what do we want the world to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, in 100 years, and in 1,000 years. And we ought to plan to get there. For instance, as a rancher, the first thing that a rancher does, if you're going to set up a management plan for the world, a voluntary management plan, suggested management plan, a modern one, knowing with what we know now in the position we're in now, with 7 billion people on Earth, and another billion being added every 15 years, that's totally unsustainable. 1 billion people went to bed hungry tonight. And because of this meeting, I was one of them. That's okay. I've got some cookies in my room. You can't, that's the other thing. You've got to keep your sense of humor. Honey, the first thing you do is your management plan for your ranch is, how many acres do you have? How much rainfall do you have? How many animal units can you comfortably support on that ranch without overgrazing it so badly that if you do have a drought, that you won't get wiped out? So that's the first thing. Say the number would be 4,000. I have 14 ranches with bison on them, ranging from 500,000 bison down to just a few on the smaller properties. I think I have one herd of 8. And but that's the first thing you do. You have so many thousands. So What about the world? The first thing we need to start with is what's the carrying capacity of the Earth on a sustainable basis? Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The People Bomb 30 years ago, and I've talked about it over the years, and he thinks 2 to 2.5 billion is the right number to have everyone live at the standard of living of the average American, with basically no poverty in the world, no hunger. You know, like John Lennon's song, Imagine, you know, imagine there's no hunger. It isn't hard to do. If I'd have made it to dinner, I wouldn't be there too. Anyway, so we start with that and then come back, because the energy policy is just part of the overall policy of learning to live in a sustainable way. And we can do it and we must do it, but we have to look at a holistic plan, and I'm trying to get somebody to draw one up with some suggestions. It'll be controversial. In order to get back to 2.5 billion people, we need to have a voluntary one-child family worldwide for about 100 years. And then we go, if we started tomorrow, the 7 billion population without any genocide and without any murder or Rwandas and genocides, if we did that, we could cut back totally peacefully in 100 years, and then we could go back to two-child families after that, because that would be sustainable, and would be if we could do it now. So that's the plan. And what are we going to do with energy? What are we going to do with our economic system? You know, right now our economic system is based on growth. Growth, 7%. China's going to be up 11%. The United States is going to be up 1% next year. But that growth is totally, we don't debit the damage to the environment that growth occurs. In order to have growth, that means more houses, more people. That means more forests cut down and less of the natural world. And the natural world is on the verge of collapsing. And when we lose the environment, we lose everything. And we cannot afford for that to happen. We have to start thinking further ahead. Maybe I'll come back to it a little bit. It was just a thought that I thought. What was the question you asked now?
Never mind. I have another question for you, though, both of you, because we've been talking about, and it's come up several times, how consumerism, population, and the economy of scale of real sustainability, carrying capacity on this planet, how does that really work? And you've just lobbed us a huge idea, putting together a global plan with some, I'm assuming, you've already talked, knowing you've already talked to some of those fabulous, brilliant minds. And isn't that an interesting thought? I've never heard this before. Have any of you heard this idea before? A global plan where we really look at carrying capacity? The question is it realistic? Do you
Particularly, you've got to remember, it's going to be
we could really do that?
I think it has to be a voluntary plan. I think that if we had to make everybody have one child family and make everybody do this and be another Syria and shoot everybody down that disagreed, then let's just go ahead, ruin the planet, and go ahead and die peacefully without any more agony and grief, because I'm getting tired of it. I mean, I thought by the time that I was 70 that at least we'd have a Congress that talked to one another. You know, everybody knows I've been in sports for a while. I won the World Series in '95. And you know that a sports franchise that's going to be a winner, the team all cooperates with one another. They work together. And that's the only way you can win. When you're divided like we were in the Civil War, all you do is lose, you know. So why have we not got a more effective government now than we have? It's hard. That's a real step backwards, and it's all of our fault because we're all voters. It's our fault. The reason we got a recession and the reason that housing market collapses, we pushed the market up too much. I mean, we're all guilty, but we're all innocent too. I mean, because we're just, we're just kind of a step away. We're a step away from greatness. on one hand, and we're a step away from disaster on the other. And what we do right now, the next 5 years, particularly with global warming and energy and the oceans right? We got to save the oceans too while we're at it. And they're being overfished and depleted, and polluted. But that's what we need to do. We need to have a long-term voluntary plan. And it can be modified, because time will come. Maybe if for some miracle people decided to be like the Japanese and cut back on the population without the suggestions, then maybe we could abandon the one-child program after 50 years instead of 100. You know, a lot of things could happen. But what we need to do is be going in the right direction. And I'm afraid at the current time that in not enough ways that we're doing that.
Tom?
Well, I'd like to make 2 points. One is, the big reason that I wanted to come to this conference was to hear what Ted had to say. And I'm not joking, because I've had a chance to hear him a little bit. And to have someone think originally on the biggest topics and think in the broadest way, if you really listen to what Sally said about what Ted's done, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I had forgotten that he won the World Series, to be honest. I remembered he won the America's Cup, but I forgot that he had won the World Series. But I would say this. I see this in a very large way about values. And I honestly feel as if the problems that we're having in DC and the issues that we're having about energy, which is the thing that I'm probably more focused on than anything else, really have to do with what do you care about? Because what Ted's saying is basically we need to agree together on what we care about and what we love, basically. What do we love? And if what we love is consumerism, that is something which is going to have side effects that I'm going to regret a lot. And I talk to, not everyone may, but I think the question we really have to come together on is, how much do we love the physical country that we live in? And how much do we care about other people than ourselves? And how much happier are we going to be if we voluntarily do things for each other and for the planet? And my goal has been for people to have the fun of doing that. That's going to be something where we're all going to have a huge kick in the pants and get great pleasure from remembering those things and going back to those things. So I'm so impressed.
I think we need to, as part of our new plan, we need to put a new emphasis on what's really important and what isn't. For instance, I really believe, having had everything, that really it's not things that really bring you happiness, even though our consumerist media, which I was part of, I helped sell people on things that they didn't really need. Lots of them. Sometimes even things they didn't want, but they bought them because everybody else had them. But we ought to, instead of emphasizing that the value of your life is caused by how much you accumulated and made, that the value of your life and your happiness comes from your relationships with your friends and family. That's way more important than whether you've got a Cadillac or a big car, to have a lot of love and friendship and companionship. And then secondly, from that, I can't remember. Go ahead. I got a little ahead of myself.
Well, this is a really good piece of talking about philanthropy, because philanthropy really is based on, good philanthropy is based on sound principles and values. And I would like your opinion, either one of you, about, do you think that that the divide in our Congress now, in our elected bodies, that divide is a difference in values?
Well, for my sins, I am a Democrat. But So I haven't been totally, above the fray. I would say this. The thing that I have always rooted really hard as the son of two Republicans for a strong, well thought out, fabulous Republican Party. Because in my opinion, I always want people who are there because they love America to be pushing strong ideas that are sensible and brilliant and maybe different, and that's fine. The thing that I have found distressing, I was in DC a couple of times over the last 2 months, and I was there talking about energy, and I was talking to both very conservative Republicans who are my friends and some pretty darn liberal Democrats who are my friends. And the thing that I found distressing was how mad they were at each other on a personal basis, and how I really, if you read in the paper, I really hate to see someone use the word treasonous about other people who are who are working. And because my assumption is, if you're there because you actually do love this country, and you may disagree, and you may disagree really wholeheartedly, but the assumption is that you're coming from a good place. So when I watch what's happening in DC and the obvious dysfunction that I think really shocked the world over this debate about the debt ceiling, the thing that disturbed me as a American citizen was the idea that people didn't grant each other that benefit of the doubt, that they were trying, that even if they disagreed wholeheartedly, they disagreed because they were trying to do the right thing, and that didn't make them a bad person. And I found that upsetting.
Well, civil dialogue has really been submerged in our political system, particularly at the national level. And when you drill down deeper in that conversation, I think that there is, and you and I talked a little bit about this earlier, is that this seems to be a country that's starting to be more it's about more self-interest versus the collective interest. And what do I get out of it? How am I going to benefit? How is my party going to benefit? And that, I think, is unraveling, and the divide in the values and not listening to the other party's position, just as you were saying, is how do we mend that? When we have such complex problems, how do we mend that divide? What's your opinion?
Leadership. It's the only way. I supported President Obama and when he was running, and I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's a straight thinker. But with the passage of time, the proof of the pudding is that somebody can get things together. I mean, you don't know whether a coach is going to be a Super Bowl coach or not until he's had the team for a few years. I had the manager with the best record in baseball, or the third best record ever, and Bobby Cox. He's just retired. But I fired him also 30 years ago because we had a meeting at the end of the season and we'd finished in last place. It was his first year there, and the management team of the Braves said, we got to let the manager go. He's got to take the fall. And I said, well, I don't think he had a very good team. But they said, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. You fire him anyway. Either you win or you get fired. I said, well, but we fired him, and we hired Joe Torre, and 2 years later, I fired Joe Torre. And then I hired Cox back. But I was the only owner in baseball to ever fire the two best managers in baseball. But I learned something from it, and after that, we won 14 consecutive pennants in the world to set an all-time record for consecutive victories in any professional sport ever. So, I would like to say at the beginning I wasn't losing, I was just learning how to win. But the record has to speak for itself, because you get judged on your record. And right now, I'd have trouble giving Obama anything better than a C, even though he has the most difficult, this is the most challenging situation or set of situations that anybody's ever seen. And the global warming issue is clearly the most complicated, complex issue that citizens of any country have ever faced. And it's almost a little beyond us. I mean, we learned so slowly at the beginning. For 3 million years, human beings have been on this planet. And during those first 3 million years, before 15,000 years ago, the dawn of agriculture, there were only 2 technological developments that really were significant. One was the making of stone tools, and the other was fire. And then, all of a sudden, 15,000 years ago, we learned how to farm, and from then on, it was accelerating the amount of knowledge that we got and the amount of speed. When I was born, there was no television. There were no nuclear weapons. I mean, talk about a more complicated world now than then. It's 1,000 times more complicated than it was. And we're still the same people. When people ask me about the nuclear situation, which I'm working on too, you know, I have to say, they say, you know, give us a synopsis. I say, it's monkeys with nuclear weapons. You know, it's, you know, because we act like monkeys with them. What the hell do we have them deployed, ready to blow ourselves up with? We're not even enemies with Russia anymore. We're trying to sell them natural gas. Don't bomb your customers.
Rule 1 of business.
That's the first thing in business.
What's number 2?
The first rule of business.
I didn't like anybody being killed or hurt anywhere in the world because they were a CNN viewer, you know.
Let me kind of circle back here to philanthropy, because in this country we have a great lineage of philanthropy that most other countries don't have. And you have been one of the leaders, and here we have someone who is coming forward in the same way. I'd like to understand a little bit more about why you chose what you did, and how do you filter the thousands of causes that there are that come your way. What's your filtering mechanism?
Well,
why have you chosen
with global
those
warming and the problems with the oceans and the atmosphere, and really refugees and peace and security, we have to have the United Nations. We absolutely have to have it. If we had not had the United Nations at the end of World War II, we never would have made it through the Cold War. We wouldn't have made it through the Cuban Missile Crisis. It would have gone nuclear. Remember when Khrushchev went to the United Nations, he was speaking, and he was so mad at America at the time that he took off his shoe and beat the podium with his shoe for emphasis. But he didn't send the bombers. Because if you have a chance, if you give the enemy a chance to be heard, and you listen respectfully to them, my one-liner for how to get along with everybody is to treat all persons everywhere with respect, dignity, and friendliness. If you do that, you won't have any enemies. You don't need bombers. You know, send doctors and teachers. And then you make friends and customers out of the rest of the world, and you won't have any enemies. And that's what I've done. I don't have any security. Watch somebody shoot me down tonight. I tell everybody, if they want to get rid of me, and I just assume I'm ready to go just about any time, but if you want to get rid of me, get rid of nuclear weapons, and then I'll leave peacefully. You won't have me to kick around anymore.
So you didn't answer the question.
Which one? I thought I did. What question was
He
it?
did answer the question, though, Sally. Because what he said was, he does the stuff that he really cares about.
Well, that he really cares about, and he has, yes.
All right.
But he's chosen things.
Why the UN?
Why the UN? Why
$1 billion to the
why do you
UN?
have a bumper sticker that says "I break for butterflies"? Another one that says "Save the humans."
We need saving. We saved the whales, now let's see if we can save ourselves.
Where did that come from?
Well, it came from, first of all, as a little boy, watching the United Nations get started, and watching it develop, and watching what happened like the Khrushchev incident. There were lots of them. There were lots of examples that having a debating society, if nothing else, it's worthwhile. But to have a place where we could all come together, because global warming, these problems we face today, we can't solve them as a nation. If we do everything right and the rest of the world keeps burning up, creating carbon dioxide, then we're still finished. So I think we need to everybody's got to be part of it, and that's why we've got the UN. It's up and functioning, and let's use it. And the reason I gave them the money is the UN was broke 15 years ago, practically broke, because the United States was over $1 billion in arrears. They hadn't paid our dues for 2 years, and they couldn't pay their peacekeepers. They were missing payroll checks, like the United States almost did by not renewing our bills. And if we hadn't had the UN, we had to, and I wanted to. My first idea was to go to the UN and buy the debt at a discount, like you would a note that was not being paid, maybe a 20% discount or 15. I give them 800 million. I get billions and millions mixed up, and now now for the first time we're dealing with trillions. Have you noticed that? When I was a boy, it was millions. I mean, even the federal government, billions nobody had $1 billion yet, less had given it away. So that I went and I found out I couldn't do that because an individual can't sue the federal government for non-payment. So that didn't work. So I went back and I thought, what can I do? I said, well, I could give $1 billion to the United Nations. And when I got the United Nations Association wrote me and told me that I was getting the award for the person that had done the most for the United Nations, like you got the award a little while ago. And that I had to appear and make a speech in New York at their annual meeting, at the United Nations Association annual meeting. And I was flying to New York. I wait till the last minute to think about what I'm going to say a lot of times, and it shows. But I said, well, why don't I just announce that I'm going to give the $1 billion to the UN and pay the dues for the United States? Step in for my country, God damn it. So I called my lawyer, and I said, I'm going to give $1 billion, and I'm going to announce it Friday night, and it was already Wednesday afternoon. And he said, I'll stay up all night and look at it. And he called me back next morning and said, thank God, you can't do it. I said, why not? He said, the United Nations is set up, it can only receive money from sovereign states. It can't receive money from individuals. That's in the charter. I said, what? And I thought, oh, God, thank you, because I only had $3 billion at the time. And I said, God doesn't want me to do it. Thank you, Lord. And then I went to bed. And this was Friday night. No, that was Thursday night, the night before. And I tossed and turned in my bed at the Waldorf. And I thought, I didn't feel as good. So I thought, I said, why don't I'll set up a parallel foundation, give the $1 billion to it, and we'll do things that the UN wants to do. We'll help them with feeding the hungry and paying for refugee camps in Somalia and that sort of thing. So, and I called my lawyer back up and I said, he'd been up all night, obviously, and I said, how about if we set up the foundation? I explained it to him. And he said, that might work. Give me a couple hours. He called me back Friday afternoon and said, that works. So I went over to see Kofi Annan. I said, because I knew he was going to be at the dinner, and I think he was going to give me the award. And he was General Secretary of the United Nations, and I told him I was due, and he fell down flat because nobody had ever thought about giving the United Nations any money before, because there was no way even to do it if you did. So that was kind of fun. And it was the best thing that I ever did. It made me feel so good, and I reconfirmed that the old parable that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And ever since then, I've been a pretty happy guy. I encourage you all to do as much good as you can, because the main reason is because it'll make you feel good.
I want to ask you, Tom, the same question.
Well, I don't have nearly as good a story.
No, but you've got stories.
But I think the truth of what Ted said is a lot of this does come down to what is really fun to do, and what's fun to do are the things that you really care about and love. And of course your head comes into it. You know, you have to figure out what the things are that you're not going to do something without thinking about it. But ultimately, you want to do things that are fun and constructive. And if it isn't fun, you know, this isn't like eating spinach. This is having an impact on things that you really love, and that's the point.
That's right. And we have just run out of time. And I'd like, however, I'd like to throw out that we can take a couple questions. So do we have microphones here? I can't see because of the lights.
Where's the other $2 billion?
I gave most of it away and lost the rest, but I've still got a couple left. And if you economize and keep planes a long time and don't get the too big of yachts and so forth, you can get by on $1 billion or $2 billion.
Okay, we have a mic coming up here. We've got a question here and one in the back.
You have to practice restraint.
Thank you so much for coming. It's fascinating and just wonderful to hear from both of you, and thank you, Sally. I have a high-tech advanced technology company. We have a technology that's probably very important, and I have a question for you. For 20 years, we've been trying to get traction in this country to leapfrog, and industry won't do it, government won't do it, et cetera, et cetera. We've now gotten a huge offer for investment from a foreign country that we'd rather not have invest in us. What would you do if you were me?
Good question. Either one.
Well, what I would do is I would go several tables to my right and talk to my friend over there, who's a brilliant venture capitalist, and go through the numbers with him about what the technology is and what the outcome is. Because what you really want, of course you want the money, duh, because you want your idea to come to fruition, but you also want to work with people who are going to help you succeed. So you want a partner as well.
And you don't want to do anything that's wrong.
No.
I mean, Rupert Murdoch could very well end up disgraced and his career over at 75 or whatever, 78. You want to live your life with integrity. I remember reading a poem, very short line from Shakespeare, that were the best lines about honor that I ever ran across, and I committed them to memory because whenever any temptation came, and there's always temptation to cut corners and break the rules and get ahead that way. Look at the University of Miami, you know, the football team. Corruption in a university, a major university, right here in America. I mean, it's unthinkable. It's not unthinkable because it's happened before, but on a scale like this, at this time, you know, who needs it? Anyway, it goes like this. My honor is my life, we live in one. Take honor from me, and my life is done. Then pray, my liege, my honor let me try. For that I live, and for that will I die.
There's another question over here in the back.
So much for Madoff. Take that.
We have another question.
Ted and Tom, Phil Radford from Greenpeace, thank you for what you had to say. You all have really stretched. You've really, like Ted, your story, it hurt to give that and it felt so good. And so my question to you is, please don't give this audience a softball. What would you ask this audience to do that hurts, that's a real challenge to us personally, to make the kind of impact that we need to make?
Well, we haven't seen the plan yet, but when we get it drafted up and agreed to, at least by a committee of some sort, we'll ask you to pledge to it, and that might hurt because I had 5 children, and But I had the last one 50 years ago, and the population of the world was 3 billion then, less than half what it is today. That's just 50 years ago, and my kids are just growing up now. But that will still hurt. It to have one child would have really hurt. But if I was starting over again, that's what I'd do, because I realize that we've got to do it. We either do it voluntarily or it's going to happen for us. And I don't want it to be done by starvation and disease and war. I mean, we've got to put those things behind us, in my opinion, and concentrate on acting like civilized, modern, educated human beings.
Can I just answer that?
Yes, please.
Because I think exactly in line with what Ted's saying, the real question that we all face as individuals is how we actually live our values consistently, and it is a pain in the neck, and you do have to do things that you can't be lazy, you have to be honest with yourself, and it hurt, and you're saying, what are the things we can do that can hurt? Being honest with yourself and living your values is a hard thing to do in your life, and if we can all do that just in this room, it'd be a great thing.
Another question?
Yes, I've been car camping.
A little high, please, a little louder.
I've been car camping across the country, and I've seen so many solutions, and my soul is aching to share them. Cellular cities. If you organize a city like a cell in our body, so it produces its energy within itself. If you look at a city and look at the topography, where hills are, we can work, gravity can work with water to collect and grow gardens. And we could have an act called Every Family Farms, where single families have tax-free access to soils, garden tools, and everything they need to create gardens.
That's a great idea. What is the question, please?
Okay. The question is, can we televise create an elevating educational media for the masses, in which we show how a community comes together and illustrate the process of how they create gardens and how they create community compost and collect and create their own natural gas. So could we televise it as we move across the country, and similar climates can learn simultaneously how to do it?
Well, I'll give an answer to that. I think the answer is yes, but I'm not sure that that's a question for this conversation, in that really filmmakers and you're asking about philanthropists being able to finance something like that. Is that the question?
A show with a spotlight on sustainability.
A show with a spotlight on sustainability.
We'll do a show that goes with the plan, and it'll be, the spotlight will be on sustainability, if we get the plan agreed to and drafted.
Does that answer your question? Okay, I'm just about ready to close this.
So
there we go.
Let me target the plan then, because there's probably two degrees to that. One's the big difference, where you've made large contributions and started say a groundswell perhaps, and then the other side is the small change, right? The average person. How do you contribute to that plan? So there's a populist approach to that, and we talked about organizations, but they're made up of people. People vote for Congress, that we're supposed to have those representatives act on our behalf. But in this case, I think nobody really has an answer. So how do you really target a problem and start to attack that on a method, with a method, and I'm speaking from a perspective where I work for a Japanese company, and Fukushima is a great example. That's the snow monkeys who put a nuclear reactor in the wrong place, right? So.
Tom?
I'm not sure you're asking me that question, but I'm going to just take a stab at it, which is this. The big change is that have happened in American society are movements when millions of people decide something really matters to them. I mean, that's really what the civil rights movement was. It was when it was organized. People think the civil rights movement just happened. It didn't just happen. That was a heavily organized, disciplined group of people pushing and pushing and pushing over decades. And what it did was it changed American opinions over time because they got a chance to think about it, and it came into the forefront of their brains instead of the back of their brains. And they realized this isn't right. And I think that what we're really talking about here when you talk about both change at the very top of society and all these elite, famous people, and also change broad-based for all the 300 million Americans or around the world, as Ted accurately and thoughtfully likes to say, that's a movement. And that's something where a whole bunch of things are happening, where people are changing their minds and thinking about things when they sit at the kitchen table together as a family and think, this matters to us, it matters to our kids, it matters to my spouse. And so it's going to be little things, and it's going to be big things, and there's going to be a TV show on it, and there are going to be a bunch of people organized at college campuses around the country, and that's how change happens in a big way.
Yeah, and Kevin Bacon's the example that I have as a connector, right, between the marginally small people who companies use his name to facilitate $500 million of giving on a small level to organize various charities.
Did you hear that?
Kevin Bacon.
Okay, one more. This is it.
You are a tough lady. One more.
During World War II, all the people of the Allied nations sacrificed. They all came together, and as a people, as a nation, as allies, we sacrificed. Do you think that we can pull together and do the same? We had a panel today who talked about human behavior, that they respond most to issues where they might lose, but at the same time, they don't want solutions where they might lose. And I think many of us feel like we have been living beyond our means in this world. With deforestation, species loss, pollution, et cetera, et cetera. And do you think we really can focus on this as almost a war against ourselves? Can we go that far? I'd like to know what you
We can, and we must, or we won't be here. And that is a possibility, but it's one that I've refused to accept. I was good friends with Captain Cousteau, and quite a few years ago I was on the Calypso. We were doing a program about the Amazon, and I had a conversation with him, and I said, Captain, I get discouraged at times. I don't think we're going to make it. This was 20 years ago. And he said, Ted, even if we knew for certain that we were going to lose, which we don't, even if we knew for sure, what else could men of good conscience do but keep fighting to the very end? And as long as the reason that we're going to win and the Tea Party is going to lose is because we're right and they're wrong. And, and as long as I'm around, we're not going to give up. You know, when the Braves were in last place, I was out there every game, God damn it, till 2 o'clock in the morning when they put extra innings. They were not going to, I was going to win or die. And we're going to win or die. That's exactly right.
So these are really tough issues to wrestle with.
We need everybody to speak out, so yes.
What would we do differently?
We have to start thinking further ahead. And we can do it, and we must do it.